Hey there, I hope you all are well and navigating the current times to the best of your abilities. It's our bi-weekly AstroTarot. I am Katie Cat, and we have a new moon tomorrow in the sign of Leo, which means the moon and the sun are going to be coming into the same proximity in the sky, and so we won't be able to see the moon until, of course, it starts waxing in a few days, and then we'll start to see a little bit of a sliver. But whenever we have a new moon, it is a great time for new beginnings. And what's particularly interesting about this setup here is that with the sun passing over the beginning degrees of Leo, along with the moon, they are going to be in an opposition to the planet of Pluto, which is over in the sign of Aquarius, currently retrograde, and it will be retrograde until about mid-October, when it will start moving direct. Now, the sun will be in square position to Pluto when it is in the sign of Scorpio on the 24th of October. And so we see this kind of setup happening right now. Whenever we have a 90-degree angle or a 180-degree angle happening by way of planetary positions, it creates what's called a square, which is a challenge. And challenges bring friction into our lives, but friction is where we create fires and warmth and create change and all sorts of things. So while our society has made us think that challenges are bad things, they can actually help us to see what we're truly capable of and help us to kind of resolve things that we've been holding on to. So before I go down a rabbit hole of talking about squares and trines and all of those things, let's take a look at the sky, and then we will look at what's being highlighted in this week's Astro Tarot for the new moon in the sign of Leo. So here we have our chart for the day. We have oh, Jupiter just fell over. We don't want Jupiter to fall over. So we have the sun here in the beginning degrees of Leo. What you'll see right next to it is Mercury. Now, Mercury is currently retrograde, so it's going to be going back to the earlier degrees of Leo, and then it will start moving direct again on August 11th. So there's something that's in a time of review. We may see conversations from the past come up, or things that we have to revisit again in the near future in this time frame, because Mercury governs communications, it governs short distance travel, so it can be talking about our vehicle and our transport and also our electronics, and so be careful around purchases. That's what they say, any big purchases of electronics or things during the time of Mercury being retrograde. Of course you can do that, but you have to really slow down because Mercury is in this time of review. Be careful if you feel like a sense of pressure to move with haste, because that means that you may have to go back and revisit it again. I recently had that happen last fall when Mercury was retrograde, and I bought a computer and I thought that everything was fine. And then earlier this year, some keyboard passkey thing got engaged and I was totally locked out of my computer and had to go get access to it again. So I had to revisit something that I purchased during a time of Mercury retrograde. So those things can happen. We can have unsettled conversations come up, lovers from our past, business relationships of our past that are all kind of coming back for review. And of course, there is this interesting coincidence of it meeting with the sun. So there's something here that we have to engage with and kind of close out before we can move into the space of our true essence and the work that needs to be done here. Now, it's interesting because the sun rules the sign of Leo. So it's in its home. It likes to be there, right? And it's going to be kind of getting a new way of looking at things with this revisitation of Mercury as Mercury goes retrograde. And then, of course, when Mercury goes direct again, it's the fastest moving planet. So they will come into direct contact again in a couple of weeks. And that's when we'll see things getting resolved. Right now, we're kind of in the review process. We can see that we also have, if we keep going around the wheel here, we have Jupiter, or sorry, the South Node and Mars that just went through conjunction in Virgo. Now, south nodes are marking things that are dissolving in our lives, and Mars is the planet of action. And so there may be some aspect of your day-to-day routine, or how you take care of yourself in some scenario, even dealing with pets, because those are all things governed by Virgo, and our work environment. We may see something that we have to let go of in that area, whether it's like a bad habit, or maybe it's a way that you're self-sabotaging yourself, or maybe it's even a job. There's kind of some action that's being taken, and it's in alignment with the south node. So there's something that is dissolving there for us to then focus on where our north node is, which is over here in the sign of Pisces. Now, I did reference Pluto's position over here in Aquarius. It is currently retrograde. It'll be retrograde until November. We also see, I'm sorry, it might be October. Yeah, I already said it. It's in mid-October that will be retrograde until. And then, of course, we have the North Node in Pisces. Then we see this grouping of planets over here in the beginning degrees of Aries, which is Neptune, this blue one here, and this striped one is Saturn. Now, you'll see that those are in close proximity to being opposite of this Mars situation. And so when Mars moves into the beginning degrees of Libra, we will see an opposition there between our kind of imagination of what's possible aligned with our responsibility in life, because we have Saturn meeting with Neptune. It's like, oh, the possibilities. Well, how do we actually anchor those possibilities? That's what's happening with this conversation here. It's interesting because Saturn and Neptune are within like a degree of each other and a couple of degrees of each other for several months. So they're in this deep conversation, and they are moving retrograde. So Saturn is moving retrograde, I believe, until November. Yeah, until like late November. And then Neptune is moving retrograde until December, like the beginning of December. So they're in this reviewing process, and anything that comes into an alignment with them by way of square or trine is going to be activating that energetic. We also have Chiron over here in Aries, in the late stages of Aries, Uranus in the 0 degree point of Gemini, so that'll be kind of highlighting some big changes in the house that Gemini sits in your chart. We have Venus over here also in Gemini, and then of course Jupiter and the moon are in close proximity in Cancer. Now that's also interesting because Jupiter is a planet of expansion, and the moon kind of highlights things depending on its phase, right? If it's in its waxing phase, something is building. If it's in its waning stage, it's in a space of letting go. And so Jupiter can be highlighting something that we may need to let go of in the area of Cancer in your chart. So as the sun sets, you'll be able to see Mars on the western horizon in the sky. And of course, as around midnight, we'll see Saturn and Neptune coming up on the eastern horizon, if you have the ability of seeing them, and Uranus around 2:30 in the morning, and then Venus around 4 in the morning. You might be able to see Jupiter right before sunrise on the eastern horizon with the waning moon. But consider we have a new moon tomorrow, so the moon is going to be moving into the same proximity of the sun, and so we likely won't be able to see the new moon tomorrow because it will be a dark moon, as they say. Now, let's jump into the reading for today. This little bit of hair is like bugging me. It's my OCD Virgo rising of noticing the smallest of details that drive me bonkers. So let's jump into the cards. We have 7 cards for this week, which is interesting because the energies that they highlight is this axis here between Virgo and Pisces that is being highlighted here. And our opening card that we have for this week is the 7 of Cups. So in the 7 of Cups, we see a silhouette that is looking into a cloud that is filled with cups of different possibilities. One cup is riches. One cup is love, one cup is victory, one cup is, you know, triumph. There's all these different cups that are filled. One has a demon, one has a snake for regeneration, right? One has a laurel leaf for victory, one has a female's head, which could be, you know, love or some kind of aspiration, and then this sainthood and a castle. So all these possibilities, right? But this is a 7, so it's learning through emotional experiences, but it's also highlighting these illusions around emotional happiness. Like if I just had this cup in my hand, all would be resolved. Or if I just had this cup in my hand, all would be resolved. But the thing is that most often we're focusing on the red stitch in the tapestry, or the thing that doesn't feel like it's right, or the thing that's out of place, and we lose our energy and our investment of our time in looking at that red stitch rather than reaching for the cup that we feel most aspired and encouraged to follow through with. So we have to keep in mind that where our attention goes, everything flows, right? Quite literally, by the way of water. And this is interesting because it is a water governed card, and we have to be attentive of where our attention goes and where our energy flows. And so if you feel something is kind of, there's an expense, like there's something that's being spent energetically in a area of your life that is kind of a black hole, it's time to kind of pull that in, right? Mars in the sign of Virgo is bringing us to action and awareness of the things that we need to let go of. And maybe it's a bad habit of where we place our attention. Now, the challenge that showed up is that Virgo guy, right? We have the Hermit. The Hermit, we see a person who is cloaked. He looks like an elderly, wise man who's standing on top of a mountain peak covered in snow, and he's holding a lantern out to his community. So it's showing up as our challenge. And what's interesting is this is a major arcana. So this is highlighting not only Virgo energy, it's also highlighting the mercurial energy. And again, we have Mercury going retrograde until August 11th. And it will be coming into a conversation with the sun, and something that we have had a way of looking at something that may have been bringing us an unnecessary hardship or a wound, right? Because Chiron is also kind of ruled by the sign of Virgo. So where do you feel like you have an unhealed wound? That's the challenge. That's where we lose our energy and our attention and our life force. So something has to be drawn in. And this, by way of challenge, is interesting because, you know, this Hermit in this card goes to the peak of the mountain to gather some kind of wisdom, and then he brings it back to his community. He doesn't stay isolated there on the mountain. And that's the tricky part, because Virgos do tend to isolate. We all have Virgo in our nature, in some house of our natal chart. And so where have we been overly critical of ourselves? Where have we been overly critical of something in our lives? And what do we need to let go in that space? The South Node is reminding us of that. And we can learn something from that we can also possibly help others with, right? Healer, heal thyself, and then bring that knowing into the community to help other people. The way through this kind of gauntlet, so to speak, that we have with the South Node and Mars right now showed up as the 4 of Pentacles. So here we see someone who does look a little bit separated from the world. They're surrounded by a brick enclosure, and the city is in the background. Now they have a coin on their head, a coin that they have their arms wrapped around over their chest, and one coin underneath each foot. It's a 4 of Pentacles, so we're looking at stability here, and also kind of, you know, taking an inventory of our resources, taking an inventory of our values, and what values really anchor us, what values we hold to our heart, and what values guide the way that we think about things and the way that we speak about things, not only in the world externally, but also internally, hence that inner critic. Now, where do we set our value? And we're taking inventory of that. This is definitely a stable card. And so it's asking us to look to that stability, which is kind of interesting, right? Because we have the sun and the moon and Mercury all in fixed fire, which is stable fire. It's like setting our passions towards something in a dedicated way. And then in a few months, we will have that square with the sun and Pluto between Aquarius, right? Fixed air, and Scorpio, which is fixed water. And so there's this process that's happening right now, this transformation that we're all undergoing in our own personal way. And our values are going to be the best way to guide us through that. Now, as far as the ultimate outcome, we have 4 cards for this week, for this reading. The first of which is our Queen of Pentacles. The Queen of Pentacles is also a earth-governed card. She's asking us to look at our life path and our career, and really what we've been building up to, right? It's governed by the sign of Capricorn and the planet of Saturn, because that's the planet that governs Capricorn. But this is more of it kind of highlights a person that could be coming in to kind of help you put things in alignment, and they have their values completely guiding them because it's cardinal earth, right? It's that active earth principle. And that might be the way through this situation, is really, focus on building some kind of financial stability in your long life path. And that is a thing to reset your gaze to when you feel yourself falling into the self-saboteur of that energy that's been in Virgo, right? The day-to-day affairs where you kind of lose your energy. How can you place your sails on your ship to go in the direction you really want to go, rather than going into that whirlpool of looking at the things that aren't working out or haven't worked out, or the things that have been kind of bringing you a lack of ease? We have to re-anchor our sails in the direction we want to go. We also need to have some boundaries with that, right? We have a second 7 card showing up in our reading for this week. We see a person who's holding a wand in a defensive stance, and there are 6 wands kind of placed around the base of their feet, almost like they're standing on a platform of sorts. And they're kind of taking a step away from something, and they're also setting a boundary. So boundaries aren't only with other people, right? There are also boundaries with ourselves, like where we'll let ourselves go, where we'll let ourselves, unleash the torrents of our thoughts, right? Or where it's just really not worth our effort. It's not worth the time that we spend on it, right? Like, I was listening to someone recently who were saying, if someone has a bad view of you or is speaking poorly of you, you first have to take a step back and say, is this person even someone that matters in my life? And do I want to fall into the, disrepair of this situation, when really their viewpoint of me doesn't actually matter? And no matter what I do, it's not going to affect it or influence it. So how do we have boundaries, not only with our actions and with our community, but also with ourselves, and where we allow our minds to go, where we allow our emotions to go? And considering this is a fire governed card, right? And we have the sun in the sign of fire, fixed fire, and the moon in fixed fire, moving into fixed fire, and Mercury. There's something that we are reviewing as far as like where we lose ourselves to our heart, or maybe even having a hurt heart, right? We have to have a boundary with that, and also surround ourselves with people that are supportive of us. Now we are going to our last 2 cards. Here we find our second major arcana of the reading, which is a life lesson that we are really having to work with. It's not something that we can ignore. And we have the Devil card. This card spooks a lot of people, but what I want to kind of point out in this card, it is a dark card. We see 2 people that are kind of stuck in a cycle of sorts, with an illusionary vision in front of them, and they look like they're bound, and yet the chains that are around their necks are very loose, so they can physically remove them if they would like to, but they're bound to some kind of limitation that's self-imposed, that they absolutely can free themselves from, but it's up to them to do so. Now, this is interesting to me because this card is ruled by the planet of Saturn and the sign of Capricorn. And right now we have that interesting dance happening with Neptune and Saturn by way of them kind of in this retrograde relationship. They're both retrograde right now, moving out of Aries into the last degrees of Pisces. So there's something that they are bringing us back to review, right? There's some self-imposed limitation that each of us has in our life, in our own personal flavor, right? If it was like Baskin Robbins 31 flavors, there's hundreds of thousands of different flavors of this self-imposed limitation. There's something that we have to take a couple steps back and really look and examine in our lives as far as where do we lose our energy? Where do we lose our time? Where are we spending it in a way that's not productive or practical, right? We need to take some kind of inventory of our energy and our space and our values and figure out what that chain is so that we can take it off of our neck. And it's when Saturn is going to be moving direct again in November that I think we'll start to feel some freedom from this. But right now we're in a process of, starting to plant new seeds and kind of till up the earth of the things that are dead and not working so that we can figure this riddle out, so to speak. And with the, it's interesting to me because the opening card is this Seven of Cups kind of illusionary space, which is kind of associated with Neptune. And then we have this kind of hardcore, like it's time to pull up your bootstraps and like really get to task on where you feel like you have major work to do in this life. And that is also in this reading. So they're paired. And it's interesting because, Saturn takes around 28 years to move around the zodiac system. So it's retrograding through Aries right now, but it will be in the sign of Aries for about 2 years. The coming 2 years after it gets out of its retrograde. And Aries is the sign of self, like the younger, inexperienced self and how it matures into the adult self, the responsible self, right? Saturn, moving through that space. And this is a period that happens every 28 plus, 28, 29 years, depending on the retrogrades of Saturn. And so there is a calling to task that's happening through this situation here. So if you've been witnessing some things in yourself that have maybe made you a little bit more critical, right? Because Mars has been moving through the sign of Virgo. And here we have Saturn that is, kind of catching up and will be in opposition to Mars in a few weeks here. There is a calling to attention of where we put our energy, our effort, and where we lose it, quite simply, right? If we're spending our lives just like turning this wheel, stuck in this cycle, we can't get very far down the road. But it's going to take some work, right? Our final card for the reading is the Apprentice Craftsman, which is the Eight of Pentacles, which couldn't be more perfect, I guess, because we see someone who is working on their values, right? We see someone who is creating coins. They're shaping them. And coins are our resources, our agriculture, our beliefs. They're things that are physical. They're also our body. But this is something that is refined. It's a refined process, right? If you say, I want to get control over my debt, it's not going to happen in a day, right? Unless you're like, you win the lottery or something. And even then, it may not happen. You might actually get a lot more debt if you don't manage things correctly. But what is it that you need to spend a little bit of effort on every day that will get you to where you are going? It's going to take time, right? It's an Eight of Pentacles. There are cycles that we get into, and there might be a new cycle and a new routine that you are being called to task on. Maybe you need to invest an hour every day into working on a project that you've had in your mind for years. Maybe you need to work an hour a day just like doing the zombie apocalypse of emails that are in all of your accounts, right? What can you spend a little time on every day? Maybe it's self-care. Maybe it's preparing yourself food. Maybe it's drinking water. Maybe it's doing yoga or exercise or walking your dog. There's some new routine that we are going to replace an old routine with, but it's going to take effort and it's going to take practice. And over time, we'll see the benefit of that as things truly shift and take form. I send you all a good wish. Of course, if you would like a personal reading, feel free to reach out. You can find my products and my readings and my chakra oils and other things on my website at rootsofalchemy.com. I will have some herbalism classes coming up here in a couple of months if you're interested in that. I will also be offering a chakra kind of seminar to educate people about the chakra system, the energetic channels that we each have and how they can get blocked and influence and affect our health and our relationships. That will be up on YouTube. That will not be on Facebook. It will be far too long. But if you're interested in any of the things that I do, feel free to reach out. I would love to be connected. I am a Virgo rising, and I tend to isolate myself when I work my butt off, and it's interesting because things that have been happening with my dog, I'm gonna get emotional. I'm gonna become a maple tree. I might. I feel it coming. But when my dog got hit, the amount of community that stepped up, that supported him and me and us, was like so refreshing, and it made me feel like I wasn't alone, which was great. Quite a new feeling. And then recently, where I live, we've had a couple of fires because it's really dry out right now. Oh God, I'm such a maple tree right now. It's really dry right now, and the fire is about probably less than 10 miles from my house. And so we needed to do a bunch of fire mitigation, and my neighbors stepped up and let me borrow a weed whacker, and they let me borrow a riding mower. And so I got to experience my farm girl self. And then yesterday I came home, and my neighbor had moved a whole bunch of brush and debris that was left by the previous tenant here in the yard, not too far away from the house, which was a huge fire hazard. He moved it into the middle of the field so that we could burn it this winter, which was so sweet because it would have taken me hours to do all that work. And he just helped me out as a surprise. And I just can't express my gratitude as how much gratitude I have for my community right now. And I guess even remind others like how important it is that we kind of get out of that mindset that we are all alone, because that's just one of the illusions that's keeping us from it. I send you all a lot of love and a good wish. I hope you are well, and I will see you again soon. Please remember to set an intention for this new moon. It will be a powerful new moon, and it will be in the sign of Leo. So matters around the heart, matters around creativity, things that you want to bring into being in the world. This is the first step, is to visualize it and speak about it, and then work on it on a day-by-day basis. I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.